Welcome to Some Good Tea, where we drink some tea and we share some tea. I am your host, Katie, and today I am being joined by Elizabeth, one of my writing friends. We're so excited to have you on tonight, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a great idea.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun doing this podcast. We've been going for a little while now, and especially October, November, I really have a lot of fun because I like spooky season. And then it's followed very quickly by writer's season. Anybody who's been listening to the podcast this month knows that we're celebrating National Novel Writing Month. So we have writers on and we have fans of books on, and we get to talk about all things books and writing, which is why you're here. Is very exciting.
Thank
Uh,
you.
the tea that we're enjoying tonight, guys, is by Stash. And this might be considered a faux pas by some, but this is called Christmas in Paris. I know it's not December yet. Usually I don't break this tea out until December, but it's so cozy. It's so nummy. It's perfect for like a cold, wintry evening. I don't know what the weather's like over by you, Elizabeth, but it's been a really cold, blustery day here. I'm very much a proponent of Christmas needs to stay in December. But this tea, you guys, is chocolate. It's a chocolate peppermint lavender tea. Doesn't that
Mhm.
sound
Yummy.
amazing? Yeah.
It is super yummy
Mm. Yeah.
and it's herbal. So for this time of day, it is nice to have
Yes.
something herbal rather than caffeine to keep you awake until 2 in the morning.
Yeah, you want something to calm down at the end of the day, something to get cozy with. So pour yourself a cup, guys, while we sit and tell you all about what it's like to be a writer, what it's like to get published, how hard it is. We are going to be, as per usual, rolling our 20-sided dice and taking turns answering some questions. Since this is your very first time on the podcast, Elizabeth, would you like to roll the dice first?
Sure, I'd love to. Okay, I
Mm.
have rolled an 11. Let's see what
11.
this.
Very nice in the middle of the road type of roll. Doesn't dislike you too much, this dice. Ooh. This is a good question to get started with. I think this will set the tone really well. We
Okay.
give a lot of advice as writers that have kind of been around for a hot second and been working at this for a while. Um, but who helped you to get started? Who was your primary like advisor?
Well, I was part of the way through writing my first real novel, which
Uh-huh.
is a very an early version of Dreams
Uh-huh.
Inspired, and which is out now. We had just moved back to the Pullman area, and I connected with some people who were in another writing group, and one of the ladies there was writing romances, and she
Oh.
seasonally themed romances. And she was full of energy, very positive, and was like, yeah, you can totally do this yourself. So she
Oh.
was a great role model. Really appreciated her a lot. She has since gotten out of writing and for a whole host of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And she is actually on my website if you look her up.
Oh.
Seasons of Love was her is her series.
Oh,
I
that's
believe she
cute.
has three out, but she never quite finished the fourth. I
Mm-hmm.
think she told me she got tired of hanging out with those people in her books. So anyway, but she was super positive and really made it sound possible as a and in 2000 14 or 15, almost 10 years ago now,
Hmm.
felt like a really huge leap to try and do this myself.
Yeah.
And so the first time that I put a book out, it was the first edition of
Hmm.
Dreams of, and it was the first time I'd actually finished something that it was, a full story start to finish, and I got it done. But it had been so hard for me to do because I did all the editing, I did all the formatting using not the tools that we have available now.
No.
Um, this was so difficult to do that by the time I got it out, I was just like, I don't even care anymore.
Yeah.
Yay, whoopee. I,
Yeah.
I'm done. It's out there. I can't even be happy or excited about this, which
Oh,
was too, but
yeah.
it got done, and it did not take away from my desire to write book number two, which is Sylvan Dreams. So I wrote um, first edition Sylvan Dreams, which is um, a follow up, same characters, but exploring them further.
Okay.
And I got that one, and it was less difficult. So I felt better about it.
Hmm.
So that's who my mentor was. So she pointed me in the direction of different things, including some on my online classes, which I
Mm.
did take, which were wonderful. They were very helpful.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yeah.
that's
Wow. I love that so much. That and see, I didn't realize that about you. 'Cause that's not really something that you and I have talked about before about how you got started. Um, I guess I had just kind of always assumed. So our mutual friend is one of my other guests that I've had on this podcast before. Some of my listeners already know Sonnen. Um, who's been writing for a long time, like a long, long time. And so I just always thought, like, oh,
yeah,
Elizabeth, she's probably also been writing forever and ever and ever, right? Because Sonnen kind of introduced us to, but wow,
right.
only just barely the past like 10 years or so. What a big journey you've been on.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I have always enjoyed writing, and I've always enjoyed telling stories, but I haven't always been at a place in my life where I could do that.
Uh-huh.
I wrote a whole novel. I was in high school and
Oh.
through part of college, and a friend of mine who had just graduated from college, we from the same place, um, came and stayed at my house as a kind of bridge between end of college and professional life. And
Hmm.
she helped me type out this first novel on on a manual typewriter was one of us, and we were kind of code uh, changing it, going from longhand on yellow notebook paper,
Wow.
and we had an electric typewriter. So
Wow.
we would type a chapter each, and we would swap typewriters because those manual ones sometimes made your hands tired if you
You
weren't
would get
up for it.
tired.
And
Yeah.
then, yeah, so we typed up the whole thing, and that was kind of a big deal for me. But I have not gone back to it. I'm sure I would
Oh.
smile and say, "Yeah, that's my first novel. We'll just put
Oh.
that back in the drawer."
I
But,
mean,
it was a fantasy novel, and I enjoyed doing it.
mhm. I think that's like those like stepping stones are important to have. And I think
Yeah,
like sometimes, especially if you're still either in that phase or just stepping out of that phase, part of us, I think sometimes we're either prone to wanting to toss that or not ready to let go of it too much. Like it's still part of you, right? It's still part of your growth, and that was important. That was a really important stepping stone. So, like, don't get rid of it, you know? But, like,
it's somewhere. I mean, we've moved
yeah,
several times. I'm not sure where it is
yeah.
now.
But I think it's important to not discount what your past self did, the work you did, and like especially how physical it was having to physically hand write it out and then hand type and transcribe something like that. As like writing has physically come such a long way since then. But that was a growth period, and the writer that you are now wouldn't have become if you hadn't been the writer that you were then. And so I think we need to be kind to our past selves and our past work. Even if you don't ever publish that, that's okay. That's totally fine. Yeah, and that's fine, right? She's mouthing like
Right.
never. That's totally fine. I definitely have some of my own that I look back and I'm like, "Ugh," right? Very cringe. But like,
Yeah,
I'm so glad that I did it when I did and that I
absolutely.
learned. Yeah. How else would you learn
Absolutely.
if you didn't do it?
Exactly. And I wrote some fan fiction
Oh my
for
gosh, who didn't?
the television shows that I absolutely loved, and I wanted to take the story in a different place and use those characters again. So I enjoyed writing fan fiction. So yeah, but
I
there you go.
it's just good to write. It's just good to write. And I think sometimes, depending on where you're at in your skill and in your learning process, you can get tackled by this imposter syndrome of, but I'm not here yet. And there's so much further to go. It's okay. Like, as long as you just keep writing and you just keep working on your craft, you're gonna grow, you know?
One of the pieces of advice that I got through taking one of these classes,
Hmm.
I had, I think, the first 5,000 words looked at by someone who had recently published their first book, but had been working at writing for a long time.
Yeah.
And she said, don't compare yourself to people who have finished work
Yeah.
because they have gone through so much editing and so much reworking that it's not fair to you when you're still in the editing and reworking and maybe even drafting process to go, oh my gosh, my work is terrible compared to that. Well, their first draft probably wasn't all that great either. So
Yeah.
don't compare yourself to people's finished stuff. And it's just like, that's good advice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. We love to be able to like compare and measure and all of that. And sometimes it can be helpful as a way to gauge our progress. Um, but we got to be
Right.
careful. You got to be so careful because you don't want to use that as a way to if you're stopping yourself, right? If it's tearing you
Right.
down, if it's stopping you, then that's not a helpful measure of progress. Um, but wow, like I knew that was going to be a great first question. I'm gonna roll the dice and see where we get to go next.
Definitely your turn.
Yes. Let's see. My little iridescent dragon dice are not as nice as yours. I got a 2.
Oh, okay.
Oh, but it's all right. Let's see, let's see. So, my question is, and you're welcome to pitch in with this as well, because we're so
Okay.
formal on this podcast. Why do you keep writing? Because it's certainly not as glamorous as social media would like us to believe. So, why do you do it? I think for me, especially with where I'm at in like my process, I just like to write, you know? Like I just like to create stories. Um, I like the process. I like the challenge. I like to see what comes out on the other side. I like to I like to read. There's that too. So yeah, I like creating stuff. I can't turn that part of my brain off. I
No,
try.
me, I
Mhm.
totally feel you, sister. Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
Well, and we don't talk about our day jobs on this podcast, but I have a STEM heavy day job. And so it's very different from like the creative arts. And so I do also feel like it's good for me to like switch my brain to something else. It's like a good stress relief for me.
yeah,
It's nice. It's a way for me to just like explore um different mindsets, different characters, uh whole other worlds. It's like it's cool.
yeah.
I like creating stuff.
I agree. I actually have a job where I do get to write, and I feel like my fiction writing informs my day job, which is as an
Hmm.
archaeologist and doing research and putting together backgrounds for regions and history and
Ooh.
ethnographies and things like that. And I have been told by my colleagues um, that the writing that I produce is more readable. Just like I am sure that
Yeah.
to tell a story in a fiction setting really informs being able to tell history um, in a more interesting fashion. So I
Hmm.
am lucky in that both of those things inform me in writing because I absolutely spend times like, ooh, ask the big brain.
Yeah.
Um, was this word available in 2009?
Yeah.
Or what is the thieves' cant word in Regency England versus the one in Victorian England? The big brain will tell you these things. So
Yeah.
you just have to know to go and look it up. And I love doing that.
Yeah, being able to mesh the like two sides together
Right.
because you can then like pull on that side to inform your writing and vice versa, and it makes both like more fleshed out. Um, yeah, I love that. I do freaking love that. And my science brain absolutely heavily influences my writing. Like there's I I wouldn't consider my writing to be science fiction because I don't think that it's like sciency enough, right?
Mm,
Right? I
sure.
don't right, I don't think it's sciency enough. But like outside perspectives, they think it's sciency enough, but I don't think it is. I'm like, "No, guys, it's not real. This isn't how science works. I made this science up." But
As long as it's consistent
yeah.
and at least maybe stays most of the rules of physics, except the ones that you choose to change,
Yeah.
then it's science.
Yeah, it does. It does. It follows all the rules except for the ones that I'm like, that would be cool if this was a little bit different, or if that was a little bit different, or if we explain this a little bit differently. So like, yeah, my writing is very heavily informed by like my STEM training. I wish I could say that my like writing in my day job could be like better, but nope.
I have a question back for you. Did you start by writing science things and have to
Ooh.
then
Ooh.
adapt yourself towards fiction? Because I did, and wow, I had to really learn to write fiction.
Oh, snap. So, okay, I have always been a walking like conundrum of a dichotomy, right? There's always just been two parts of Katie. Um, and one part was like, I want to be an author and I'm gonna go write a bunch of books. And the other part was like, I'm gonna study science, la 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 la. And and that's what my voice in my head sounds like, guys. Um, but but I always knew I was gonna go into like STEM and all of that stuff as far as my like career goes. And I thought about like doing like a dual major in like my undergrad, but I was already taking like like 18 plus credit hours because I was
Yeah,
like,
that's a lot.
yeah, yeah. I had no life, okay? I had no
Yep.
life. I was the like Hermione Granger, just nose to the grindstone. I didn't do anything. I just studied all the time. Um, and it was fine. And like I just would write um for fun
To
when I
escape.
to escape. Yeah, to
Yeah.
escape. I wrote all through college. I wrote when I was in high school. And it was all for fun and it was all just for me mostly. And I always wanted to like I took the required classes, but I didn't take anything more because I literally couldn't. Like I
Right.
couldn't
No
fit.
room.
Yeah, I had no room. I wanted to real bad. But I already had three minors because of my I know it's a problem, okay? I
But
but
no,
it's because of my major and the classes that I needed to take that I ended up with all the STEM heavy stuff.
right.
So yeah, and then higher education and graduate degrees and stuff happened. And I did do a lot of scientific writing because I was involved in like a lot of research and like that stuff is like soul sucking.
Yeah, it's a very particular style.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't do enough fiction writing during college and graduate school, which there was a little break in between, but a lot of science heavy stuff.
Yeah.
This happened, that happened, and just very linear,
Hmm.
and very explanatory,
Oh yeah.
and very
Very
much following a
passive.
formula.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yes.
following a formula.
Yeah.
So, if any of you find my first edition of both Dreams of Fire and Sylvan Dreams, you will probably wince a fair amount and be like,
Oh,
okay, I'm not sure I need to read this because it's very plotting from
yeah.
one thing to the next. So I did the unthinkable and I pulled both of those books from the Amazon shelf that I put them on and kind of decommissioned them and I
Hmm.
rewrote both of them because I really love the characters enough to want to make them more accessible and more fictional, more
Alive.
interesting, more
Yeah.
storytelling, alive, yes,
Yeah.
rather than linear plotting.
Yeah.
And so um, there are two versions out there for that reason. And I'm much happier with
Yeah.
the second edition.
Yeah.
And things changed somewhat between first and second edition for both of those books, but they are largely the same. The same major characters are there. And
Hmm.
then book three, which is Hallowed Dreams, which is a Halloweeny themed
Yeah.
one, and just got done with that month. But I having on the heels of rewriting books one and two, I was able to segue more comfortably into writing book three. And I'm just finishing book four, Legends and Dreams, which is about a haunted theater. So, in
Oh,
case you can't guess from our conversation, I write cozy ghost stories. They
spooky
are
ghost.
not horror. I am not a horror fan at all. That it scares the bejesus out of me, and I lay awake all night. What's that noise? Oh, what's that noise?
Ooh.
And I'd rather not do that, but I do like a good haunting, and I
Mm.
do like characters who are able to take scary situations, be afraid, but then figure out how to deal with that and
Yeah.
make themselves more confident, and more able to take on the next challenge, which is why the Maple Hill series has a long arc from
Hmm.
start to finish. Characters all change from start to finish, and they are. It's not episodic the way
Hmm.
some series are, where the characters within are largely static.
Yeah.
Instead, my characters change. But each book is a complete story. I do
Oh,
recommend
nice.
reading them in order. It is helpful,
Yeah.
but they don't leave you in a cliffhanger going, "Oh my gosh,
What
what's going to
happened?
happen?" Instead, it's a cozy warm up, wrap up.
Yeah.
Say the problems and themes within that particular book have been resolved,
Hmm.
and that person, the main character, Marianne, is able to decompress and be like, okay, I have accomplished this thing, and now I can move forward. So, and then the next book presents new themes and new challenges,
Oh,
and um, that those get resolved within the covers of that book as well. So,
I love it. I like that very much. I'm very excited about them. I'm really excited for your fourth one to come out. And I love that you went back and you kind of reevaluated like the style of that first two. Um, and yeah, and we're willing to just be like, you know what? I like where this is going, but let's like freshen it up. Let's make it breathe a little bit differently. Um, I feel like for me, my writing, the problem always was that my scientific writing was always too uh flowery.
oh, interesting.
Right, it was the opposite problem,
Right.
and I got flack for it most of the time and had to learn to be more like precise and
Mm-hmm.
succinct.
Yeah.
Um, and it was hard. It's still hard, right?
Mm.
It is still difficult for me. Um, because that's not how I write. That's just not how I write. That's not how my brain works. That's not how we do. Um, but I am grateful for the training that I had,
Mm.
right? But like most of my writing training is scientific writing. So it's just weird that I ended up where I am with my writing. It's weird. It's definitely weird.
I think that's fascinating. I went back. I was reminded of my PhD dissertation in
Yeah.
archaeology. It's a particular archaeological site up in the Aleutian Islands. That's where
Oh,
I did. Um, and I went back and read the first chapter and went, "Oh my God, who wrote this? This is
ah,
horrible." It was terrible from my writerly perspective now, like 25 years later. And it
honestly,
was
I bet it's
and
amazing. I bet it's great. I would love to read that. That sounds so fascinating.
it presents the information in a very,
The way that it should
subject
be.
verb, subject verb.
Yeah.
I do remember also, by the time I got to the end, I did my conclusion chapter as a story. I was desperate to tell a story about the people who had lived here, and there were four different occupations, and to make my best guess as to how they felt about doing things. Which, to be honest, my graduate committee gave me kind of the side eye of like, yeah, just don't do too much of that because that's not proper science. Just like, yes, but we have to tell a story
Had to tell
so
a
that
story. Yeah.
yes, so that people go, why do I care? Because I'm
Yeah.
telling you this story about people who lived here.
Because these
So,
people were real and they
right.
breathed and they were human and they had a life and emotions, and we want you to feel emotions about them. Yeah. Well, should we get back on track? I think we have time for maybe like one more question. Do you want to roll the dice?
Huh? Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Okay.
if you want to do more, we can. We've been
Why don't you
recording.
do that?
Okay.
All right. So we're back in the single digits with an eight.
Ooh. An eight's a nice, like a nice round number. I think that's a good question. Hmm. What makes you want to write? What drives that creativity for you?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, um, I know that if I don't write and I have a story kind of hovering in my mind, I get really squirrely, really antsy, and I feel like
Mm.
I need to do this. It's going to just explode. I will explode if I don't have time to write. I mean, I'll want to burst into tears and be like,
Aw.
do this other thing. I just give me an hour and a half, just an hour and a half, and I will sit here and I will write whatever the next scene is, or I will explore a particular character. Um, sometimes, if I stay away from it for too long, it kind of recedes into the distance, and it's like, no,
That's fair. That's true.
come back. I need you back here, right up front, because I love telling stories, and
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed telling the story of the haunted theater in
Yeah.
Legends and Dreams. Yep. And I'm dedicating it to my father because he was in theater all of
Aw.
his professional life, and at the college that I was affiliated with from a kid. Both my mom and dad worked at Vassar College, and so I was a faculty brat, and I got in. I think because they were like, yeah, yeah, okay, your grades are good enough, and both of your parents work here. Okay, okay,
I
fine.
guess so.
So I loved it. And the drama department was a place where I was very comfortable. So I really wanted to write, um,
Aw.
but I also will say, so shy, never comfortable actually on stage, be like, all those people are staring
Wow.
at me. And so it took me a long time to feel even remotely comfortable on a stage setting. But I love
Aw.
writing about it for this story, and so it's
Aw.
dedicated to my dad and the group of other professors and people he worked with in the department during the 30 years that he was there.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
beautiful. That's so beautiful.
and I had fun telling the story, and I think he has passed away, so he will not be able
Wow.
to read it, but he's a ghost in my past in a good way.
Yeah.
And I'll imagine him hovering over one shoulder being like, so that's not working, you should try it this other
Try
way.
this.
Have you tried turning it the other way, which is what he would say to me when he could speak and I could hear him. So
Aw.
I imagine that he would appreciate it. So
That's
anyway,
beautiful. That's so beautiful.
so I'm
Oh,
excited about that one getting out there. Hopefully by the
yes.
end of December.
Yes, and that's coming up. That's coming
Yeah.
up really fast.
Yep.
I feel like once you get going and you learn the process and you kind of know what it's like, then you can just kind of get on the train and just chug. Just chug a chug chug.
Sometimes
Um,
you get stuck though. I mean, you know
yeah.
something has to happen, but it's like, how am I going to get there?
Uh,
And you just have to sit there and ignore your distractions. Like, no, we're
mhm.
not going to check email. Stop. No, we're not going to go with the laundry. Sit right
Sit
here.
your
Okay.
butt down.
Um,
Hmm.
and then just type nonsense, like have
Yeah.
dialogue that you're going to throw away later.
Oh yeah.
Just get the ball rolling, and that helps.
Yeah.
That does.
Just start moving, start doing. Yeah, like you said, even if you are gonna delete it later on, it's just a hot mess, whatever it is. Like just get going. It's
Right.
a snowball going down the hill. You just need to build up the momentum. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I have to be careful that I keep track of like what time it is when I'm writing, because most of my writing is after work.
Sure.
Because I have an adult job, with adult job hours, like a very adult job.
Yeah.
And so I'll get home at the end of the day and I'll be like, "Oh, good job, good little Hermione Granger. You get to chocolate bar. You can write now." And then I'll look up at the clock and it'll be like 11:30, and I'll be like, "You needed to eat dinner." It's a struggle, so I have to be very like I will set like alarms and stuff on my phone to be like, "Go eat food. You need to do laundry," stuff like that. But my days off are great because I can like unplug from being an adult and plug in and just write. Uh, yeah. So it's better. It's great.
That sounds pretty dang good. I am
Yeah.
glad for you. Writing is also like a muscle, and if
Mm.
you don't exercise it, then you sort of go like, I don't know, I used to know how to do this, and now it's just so hard, and I just and you have to go back and exercise that muscle
You
so
do.
that when you're like, okay, I have this story, I have 1 hour instead
Hmm.
of spiraling around wondering what you're doing,
Yeah.
you are a lot more focused and ready because your brain is like, oh, that's right,
Yeah.
this is what we need to do. So having that regular writing time, even if it's not very long, is
Oh yeah.
super helpful.
Oh yeah. And like I don't always have like a reliable time, right? Because sometimes I will get stuck at work for forevers. And being understanding about that I think is also good. Being understanding that like life happens. I think with any kind of like goal, right? Whether it's you're trying to work on your writing or maybe you're trying to work on like working out, going to the gym, that type of thing. Like whatever thing you're trying to work on and being like, ah, man, I didn't do it today, therefore I suck. Like, no, 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 no. Like, it's okay if you didn't do it today, just do a little bit tomorrow. You don't have to like sit down and write for an hour every single day. Just do a little bit today. Like, that's okay. That's totally fine. And maybe like you don't do today at all because you're overwhelmed, but you do a little bit tomorrow, and then the next day you fall short again. Like, it's fine. You're just working on it, right?
I also find that spending the time daydreaming about the story.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I love when I drive, and I'm the one driving. My husband and I swap off when we drive long distances because
Nice.
it's a lot. But he often like falls asleep because
Hmm.
he's just exhausted from driving. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of silent time, just like, and how will that first chapter go?
Go. What
And
about
so
this conversation?
I start writing in my head. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't have time to actually sit down and write with pen and paper or
Hmm.
type with a computer or a typewriter, you can imagine chunks of your story and visualize those scenes so that when you are ready to write and you do have the time, it comes easier to you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of bringing it back to,
Hmm.
but if you don't have time to actually write, you can think about it.
Oh yeah.
And that'll take you quite a long way sometimes.
I love that you bring that up. That's something that I don't think me or any of my guests have ever talked about. That's something that I do a ton of. Like just existing in these worlds, in these characters, in these stories that I've either written or am working on writing all the time. We'll just kind of hang out in that plot line and be like, oh, what if I went this direction? Or, oh, what if I went that direction? Or, this scene is a little murky. What about this? Um, or just being in that space, you know? It helps. It helps a ton. And especially if you're stuck somewhere, if you're stuck and you feel like you're fighting with like writer's block,
Mm-hmm.
um, it helps you to get re-excited about your own stuff, to like daydream essentially about
Yeah,
it, you know?
absolutely.
Yeah, I that's how I would describe kind of that whole thing, of like just like daydreaming about being in your own book. Like that's also very fun. Yeah, on long drives or commutes or like when you're going for your daily walk or whatever, or you're just like going from class to another class or whatever. Those are great times to just be like getting to that headspace.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can learn things about your characters that you did not know before. Be like,
Yeah.
did not know that about you. Thank you for telling me.
Hmm.
Okay. Now I get to
Yeah.
include that as part of who you are in my story, in our story.
Our
Yeah.
story. Yeah, it's very true. That's very true. Ah, well, I feel like as fun as this has been, it's getting late. It's getting late.
Oh,
We've had a really great episode, but I think this is all we have time to talk about tonight. I'm
well,
so,
thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun, and I enjoyed hearing about your writing process
oh,
because
thank you.
that's we haven't had a chance to talk during our writing on Monday
Oh,
night sometimes, and so I
yeah.
enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more. Thank you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And again, thank you so much for being willing to come on and sharing some tea with me, with our listeners. Guys, this is all we have time for to talk about tonight, but we will talk at you later.